England was collapsing. Viking armies had torn through kingdom after kingdom. Northumbria, gone. East Anglia, gone. Mercia, broken. By the late 9th century, only one remained, Wessex. And leading it, a man who was never meant to be king. This is Alfred the Great, and how he turned near total defeat into one of the most intelligent defensive systems ever built in early medieval Europe. When Alfred took the throne in 871, he inherited a war already being lost. The Vikings weren't just raiders anymore. They were organized, mobile, and experienced. Leaders like Guthrum commanded forces that could strike without warning, move fast, and live off the land. They didn't need supply lines. They didn't need fixed bases. They chose when and where to fight. The Anglo-Saxon system couldn't cope with that. Armies were raised slowly. Farmers were pulled from fields. By the time a force gathered, the Vikings had already struck and gone. Alfred fought them early and struggled. Then came the collapse. In 878, a surprise winter attack shattered what remained of his position. Alfred was driven into the marshes of Somerset, hiding at Athelney. At that moment, Wessex was effectively defeated. But this is where Alfred's military thinking truly begins. He didn't just rebuild an army. He redesigned the entire defensive logic of a kingdom. Because Alfred understood something critical. You don't beat a faster enemy by chasing them. You beat them by controlling the ground they move through. The first change was manpower. Instead of relying on a single, temporary army, Alfred created a rotational system. Half the fighting men would be active at any given time, while the other half stayed home to farm and maintain the economy. Then they would switch. This solved multiple problems at once. Wessex now had a continuous military presence. Farms still produced food. Soldiers were less exhausted and more reliable. It wasn't just an army anymore. It was a sustainable military system. But Alfred knew that men alone weren't enough. The real problem was space. The Vikings thrived because England was open. Villages were exposed. Towns were undefended. Movement was unrestricted. So Alfred reshaped the landscape itself. He built a network of fortified towns, burhs, across Wessex. This wasn't random construction. It was planned, measured, and calculated. Each burh was positioned so that no settlement in Wessex was more than roughly a day's march from safety. That meant in the event of a raid, people didn't flee blindly. They withdrew deliberately into fortified positions. Inside these burhs were walls, garrisons, supplies, and organization. But more importantly, they were linked. This is what made the system powerful. The burhs worked together. If Vikings attacked one area, nearby forces could move quickly along known routes to reinforce it. The enemy could no longer isolate and overwhelm individual settlements. Instead, they faced delays, resistance, counterattacks. Raiding stopped being quick and profitable. It became slow and dangerous. Alfred even formalized this system in what later became known as the Burgel Heidage, a document that essentially calculated how many men were needed to defend each fortified town based on the length of its walls. This shows a level of planning far beyond simple defense. He wasn't just building walls. He was calculating manpower, logistics, and response time. It was military engineering at a national scale. And then there were the roads. Alfred improved and used existing Roman roads to connect the burhs, creating fast movement corridors for troops. This meant his forces could respond faster than the Vikings expected. Instead of chasing the enemy blindly, Alfred's army could move efficiently, predict routes, intercept, or reinforce. The battlefield was no longer random. It was structured. This leads to one of Alfred's most important strategic achievements. He removed the Vikings' advantage of mobility. Before Alfred, Vikings chose the time. Vikings chose the place. Vikings controlled the pace. After Alfred, movement was restricted, targets were fortified, response was organized. He didn't try to outrun them. He made speed less useful, but Alfred's defensive thinking went even deeper than walls and roads. He understood that defense wasn't just about resisting attack. It was about absorbing shock without collapse. Before his reforms, a single successful Viking strike could unravel an entire region. Panic would spread, populations would flee, and there was no structure to recover quickly. Alfred changed that. The burhs became centers of stability. Even if the countryside was raided, the population had somewhere to go, somewhere organized, somewhere that could hold. This meant the kingdom could take a hit and keep functioning. That is a different kind of strength. Not invulnerability, but resilience. He also ensured these fortified towns weren't just military outposts. They became economic hubs. Markets formed within their walls. Trade continued. Supplies were stored and distributed. This mattered because armies don't exist in isolation. A defended economy is a sustained war effort. By protecting trade and population centers, Alfred ensured that his military system had something to stand on. The Vikings, by contrast, relied on disruption. Alfred created continuity. There was also an element of psychological warfare in his system. The Vikings were used to fear working in their favor. Sudden attacks, undefended villages, quick victories. This created momentum. Alfred reversed that dynamic. Now, a Viking force entering Wessex faced uncertainty. Would the nearest town be fortified? How quickly would reinforcements arrive? Would they be trapped between burhs? Instead of confidence, there was hesitation. And hesitation slows armies down. He also turned his attention to the coast. The Vikings depended on their ships, their ability to arrive suddenly, strike, and disappear. So, Alfred built ships of his own, larger vessels designed for stability and combat rather than just speed. It wasn't a perfect navy, but it marked a crucial shift. Alfred was now contesting the entry points into his kingdom. Combined with the burhs inland, this created layers of defense, coastal resistance, fortified interiors, mobile field armies. This is what we would now call defense in depth. All of this preparation led to the turning point, the Battle of Edington. After months in hiding, Alfred re-emerged, not with desperation, but with structure behind him. He gathered his forces, moved deliberately, and chose when to fight. This time, the Vikings couldn't simply outmaneuver him. They were forced into a direct confrontation. The Anglo-Saxon shield wall held. The Vikings broke. Guthrum was defeated. But Alfred's thinking didn't stop at victory. He understood that destroying one army wouldn't end the threat. So instead of total annihilation, he negotiated. The Treaty of Wedmore divided England into spheres of control, Wessex and the Danelaw. But Alfred added a strategic condition. Guthrum would convert to Christianity. This wasn't symbolic, it was stabilizing. Shared religion created shared norms, reducing the likelihood of immediate renewed conflict. Alfred wasn't just ending a war, he was shaping the peace. So what makes Alfred a military genius? It's not a single battle. It's not a moment of brilliance. It's a system. He identified the real problem, not Viking strength, but Anglo-Saxon weakness, and then he fixed it. He created a standing, rotating army. He built a nationwide fortress network. He linked it with roads and rapid response. He strengthened economic centers. He layered defense from coast to interior. He forced the enemy into disadvantage. He turned a reactive kingdom into a controlled, defended space. By the time Alfred died in 899, Wessex was no longer collapsing. It was organized, resilient, difficult to attack, and even harder to defeat. The system he built would allow future rulers to go on the offensive. But Alfred's achievement was something different. He took a kingdom on the brink and made it unbreakable. Not through one victory, but through design. That's why he isn't just remembered as a survivor, but as a strategist, and ultimately, as Alfred the Great.